It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Josh will
Okay,
figure it out.
that's fine.
Okay. All right. Greetings and welcome to Ill Repute, a history of notorious women, where we look at the lives of women who lived audaciously and flew in the face of convention. Whether they were scientists making new discoveries in a hostile world or criminals foiling the law at every turn. I'm your host, Sovereign Sire, a former sex worker, a writer, screenwriter, and stand-up comedian.
And I'm Ella Darling, a former sex worker, a VR pioneer, ex-librarian, and amateur roboticist. So, where were we, Sav?
So this is part 2 of our episode on Jay-Z Night. So if you didn't listen last week, go back and listen to that because a lot of this won't make sense. Although I guess you could skip the early part of her life and you would still enjoy a wild ride for the second act. Her second act is pretty spectacular.
But you don't want to miss the first. That was a good one.
All right, so let us catch back up to where we were. Like I said, you want to listen to the first episode to get all the nitty-gritty details because otherwise it's going to seem like we're jumping right into the middle of a shit show.
Which we are.
Which we are. Last week where we left off was an entity calling itself Ramtha had appeared to Jay-Z Night, and her husband, who could not see him but was credulous when she explained that an entity had visited her, claiming to be 35,000 years old, a expatriate of Lemuria who had moved to Atlantis, who had there been a great warrior and barbarian, had killed 2/3 of the world's population in battle, then became wounded, went and sat on a rock for 7 years, attained enlightenment, and vibrated into the singularity, and decided to visit her in her kitchen in Tacoma in 1977.
And her husband said, that checks out. No notes. Let's move forward with this. Tell me more.
Yeah, her husband was like, you really stuck that landing. So to get us started for today, so this entity had appeared to Jay-Z Night, and then her husband took her to what I called a paranormal specialist lady. I imagine someone that ran a tarot card store or an esoteric bookstore. I imagine her taking Jay-Z into a back room, having a long talk with her and making an assessment. Very professional, just like going to the doctor. And what happens when she is dealing with this spiritual coach, let's call it a psychic coach, something new happens, which is Jay-Z Night doesn't just see Ramtha and speak to him, but rather Ramtha uses her body as a channel. So before we step into this epic of New Age woo, we should probably do a little primer on what channeling is.
Channeling refers to the practice of receiving and conveying messages or information from non-physical entities or higher consciousness. It involves a person known as a channeler or medium who acts as a conduit or channel for communication with these entities. The channeler allows themselves to be receptive to the messages and information which may come through various means, such as verbal communication, writing, or other forms of expression. In channeling, it is believed that the information or messages come from spiritual beings, ascended masters, angels, spirit guides, extraterrestrial beings, or other non-physical entities. The channeler serves as a vessel for these entities to communicate their wisdom, guidance, or insights. Channelers often enter altered states of consciousness during the channeling process. This may involve deep relaxation, meditation, trance states, or other techniques to open themselves up to the communication from the entities they channel. Jay-Z has been tested while channeling Ramtha, and her skin and heart rate does some pretty crazy stuff. That's not to say that Ramtha exists anywhere but her mind, but it does mean that she's going into an altered state to bring him to life.
Yeah, I'm not here to shit on anyone's beliefs, and I definitely feel that one could make a lot of philosophical arguments around channeling and its legitimacy. Maybe it's another part of your consciousness that you are gaining access to, or maybe as a teacher, this is simply the best way to bring information out. It's a performance, and all performances can have a transcendent power. So I'm not saying that channeling isn't real. I'm just saying that we don't really know what people are doing when they're doing it. I mean, channeling is real in the sense that people get up and say, I'm channeling something, and then go into a performance. So
the value of that meaning to that person is not in question here. I would say that, like, that's fine. But when you take something that is a very personal, meaningful experience that is like a dream, something really only you can interpret, and you sell that to other people as something tangible, real, that is absolutely the 100% truth, in an effort to swindle them, take their money, take advantage of them emotionally, socially, in any way, that's where it becomes like a real fucking problem. So like, channel all you want, but like, that's when you use it as a tool of manipulation, you're an asshole.
It seems like your mind went straight to that because pretty much any context for channeling that most of us know about involve some kind of swindle, some kind of hustle, as it were.
I mean, it's fertile ground for charlatans.
Yes. So channeling can take different forms depending on the specific method used and the nature of the information being conveyed. Some channelers speak the messages aloud in a trance-like state, while others write or type the information. There are also those who use artistic expression, music, or movement to channel the messages. Jay-Z does seem to change physically while channeling Ramtha. Her voice deepens, she takes a more masculine stance, and she does talk with a different cadence. Channeling has existed from the beginning of time, whether you're talking about the Oracle at Delphi, St. Catherine of Siena, to seances in the Victorian era, to modern-day mediums you see on television. So this paranormal specialist tells Jay-Z that she is a channel and that the specialist lady is going to help her learn how to use this gift. Remember that hero's journey? She got herself a magical assistant.
Oh, man. Excellent.
The other thing I want to point out is the locus of control. So far in the story, it's never Jay-Z that wants these things. Her coworker takes her to a psychic. Her mother tells her about reincarnation. Her coworker takes her to a faith healer. Her husband is interested in pyramids. Her husband takes her to the paranormal specialist. The specialist tells Jay-Z she's a channel and that she has a mission. This abdication of responsibility, ambition, and desire is essential to these kinds of narratives. There is a pressure on the prophet or the channel to be morally pure, that is, to not want this great power that they have.
She's been called so many times, and what this is part of the hero's journey is turning down the call to action, isn't it?
Yes.
What is the specific verbiage?
And in the memoir, she says, refusal of the call.
Refusal of the call.
Refusal of the call. I'm going to zoom through what happens next just because it's very predictable and mundane, where her memoir goes from personal and peculiar to essentially a sales pitch. But after her tenure with the paranormal specialist, where apparently she spent several years training and reading and preparing herself for this mission that she was going to go on. And during this time, it's Ramtha that's training her, telling her what to read, beginning to lecture her, and ostensibly preparing her body and her mind for the great task of channeling him. Because if a person's mind isn't pure enough or ready enough, they won't be able to handle the sheer power of enlightened knowledge. And that's thematic through so many cults, through a lot of new age stuff, and just a lot of wellness stuff in general, is this idea of moral purity and this idea that you have to put your mind through its paces and kind of go through a journey and reach ascendance before you're ready for the great knowledge that's out there. And it's can be really insidious because it gets very close to name it and claim it, seed faith. It gets very close to that kind of magical thinking and like what was in The Secret, this idea that everything that happens to you is your fault or because you wanted it or because your vibration was too low. Really quickly, it falls into this weird kind of fascism around that kind of purity or strength or endurance.
Right.
So just something to keep in mind, because where this goes makes a lot more sense if you can recognize the sort of Venn diagram of wellness and new age esoteric secrecy and fascism and how they all fit together because, you know, Nazis loved yoga. That's true, by the way.
Well, tying this back to something we discussed last time, not the Nazis doing yoga. God, I hope there's not a porn of it. There probably is. She frequently would end up in the hospital following her, you know, touches with mysticism.
Yes.
And so
it would be she would get really ill and then there would be some sort of mystical thing. Yeah.
Okay. So she's already
she made lightning strike twice in the middle of a big church revival. I mean, remember
and lightning
that part
doesn't
of the story?
Strike twice. It's notably a thing that doesn't happen twice in the same spot. So like that's extra special and wild.
Yeah.
Seems very special and unique.
Yeah.
Gifted, in fact. Okay. Anyway.
Okay. So after her tenure with the paranormal specialist and her 2 years with Ramtha training her, I like to imagine like the Karate Kid, just insert any kind of 80s movie montage. You can imagine her like bending spoons and reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and trying to walk with a book balanced on her head. I'm not sure. After her tenure with the paranormal specialist, Jay-Z starts to channel Ramtha at New Age gatherings where she's asked to perform. Her performances, what should we call it? She's teaching sessions, channeling Ramtha, who then talks to people about their problems and gives lectures about the universe. And
it's her course. Oh my God, it's her course, bro.
It's, So what had happened is she gets trained by this lady and by Ramtha, and then she channels Ramtha for this lady, and then the lady calls her and says, would you come out again and channel for a group of people? And she agrees to do that. And so she starts doing that. And apparently it immediately becomes so popular that she is very quickly exhausted. Luckily, Ramtha tells her that a way to slow down the requests is to start charging. And he tells her she should charge $100 per person. So this was in 1979, so that would be about $400 today.
Wow.
And crazily, it didn't slow things down, it sped them up. So by 1980, Jay-Z is holding meetings at the home of Richard Chamberlain, an actor that would rival George Clooney today.
Wow.
At this time, she also decided she wanted to get into the Arabian horse trading market. She found a trainer named Jeff Knight and invited him to one of her meetings. He had no interest in the New Age movement, was startled by the appearance of Ramtha when she channeled him, but he was impressed with her and he wanted a job. Ramtha told him that he had to go over the mountain and leave his family and friends behind to find true happiness, and that in many past lives he had failed to do so. Jeff moved to Yelm to help Jay-Z with her burgeoning horse business. At this time, Jay-Z was still traveling to other places to speak. With her money, she had turned her house into a sprawling ranch outside of Olympia, Washington. And after a while, Jay-Z told Jeff that she was in love with him and that they were soulmates. And Ramtha amazingly told him the same thing.
Whoa.
Isn't that's so crazy?
Wait, did Ramtha confirmed that they were soulmates? Did Ramtha confirm her love for him
Jeff,
also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff Knight was 22 years old and struggling with his sexuality. He thought he was gay, and he probably was. It's important to note that being gay in the early 80s was akin to being trans today. There wasn't wide acceptance, and finding out you were homosexual came with a great deal of fear and shame for many people. He was a vulnerable person. Jay-Z was in her mid-30s, a spiritual leader and his boss. He consented to marry her, which meant she had to divorce her current husband, who is called Jeremy Wilder in her memoir, though his real name is Mark Burnett, which is why people can't agree on the number of times she's been married, because there's all these different names. We're thinking that it's 3. So she had the high school friend that she married, then she married Mark Burnett, the dentist, and now she has married Jeff Knight, the 22-year-old gay horse trainer.
Wow.
I saw an interview with him. It was very, very lovely looking man for that time period. Like, if you take away the aesthetics of the late 80s and early 90s, you get it. Like what he must have looked like riding around on horses and all of this kind of stuff, just young and hot. And in her memoir, she explains that part of the problem with her husband was once that she was channeling Ramtha and giving these performances, that her husband only really ever wanted to talk to Ramtha and was constantly asking Ramtha for business advice and spiritual advice. And she felt like her husband really only cared about Ramtha. But then also, she had married her husband out of convenience. He was wealthy. She had 2 kids. And when she met Jeff Knight, apparently she felt for the first time in her life genuine just lust and longing and passion. And Ramtha advised her that she was finally becoming a real woman and that she should pursue this. So that was the reasoning behind all of that. So she had to divorce her current husband. After she marries Jeff Knight, she takes his last name and she became Jay-Z Knight. And that is the name that she would use for the rest of her life, that she still uses. She's still alive.
So an icon was born.
An icon was born, yes. So newly married and on a mission, Jay-Z begins touring the country, then the world, channeling Ramtha to audiences that were primed to believe in it. She got celebrity adherence, there were books, videos, and CDs, and a lot of money coming in. She also had a lucrative side business going, selling horses to her adherents, claiming that they had served for Ramtha or that they had served the person in a previous life. Some of these horses were selling for $250,000 in the 80s, which would be closer to $1 million today. She became so popular that she made an appearance on the Merv Griffen show. The Merv Griffen show was commensurate to being on Late Night with David Letterman or Oprah Winfrey when they were still on the air. It was a cultural touchstone and a water cooler moment. Jay-Z appeared and then channeled Ramtha. I've included the clip of her appearance here as the audio is all that is necessary and so that you may hear Ramtha as he first appeared.
Indeed. Indeed, beloved master. You are well to stay in your time?
Yes, thank you. Sit down here.
This is that which is called television.
The tube.
To capture a moment forever.
You were a little tough to wake up today. Were you sleeping when we got to you?
Wake up.
Were you sleeping?
What is slumber, entity? I am never in slumber.
Awake at all times.
At all times.
Where are you when you're not here?
Would you like to see?
No.
Would you not want to see?
Well, it might not be the kind of place I want to hang out at. I'm very happy here, my little studio, my little couch.
It is a wondrous place here, entity.
And you're my first 35,000-year-old guest.
To that which is called I, entity, be an enigma. And what is 35,000 years old?
Our anthropologists today tell us that 35 years ago, people didn't have brains like they have today. They had little, small, to the evolution of man, the brain has evolved. So it is great to know that somebody 35,000 years ago had such good command of the language.
Master, even before my time they did so. To that which is termed, is it why indeed your scientists, is it termed? They have not found the great civilizations yet. They will.
Your home was Atlantis?
That was a place that which I lived, but I was a pilgrim from a land called Mu.
What is your message? What is your most important message that you want everyone on this planet to hear, to know? Is there one?
That which is termed, is it why indeed God, which has been misunderstood, which have been taught to live outside of your being, is within your being. And that which is called Christ is within your being. And that which is called life is the grand experience, that it is where the kingdom of heaven is located, entity. When know you that which is termed you are God, that which emanates within you is divine. You will find joy. I do not want to deliver a message. I am that which I am. That is it why indeed which they are who listens. That which is the Christ within, it comes forward. You have lived 7.5 million years in search of paradise. It has always been within you, never outside of you.
Mm-hmm. The kingdom of heaven is within each one of us.
Indeed.
A lot of us have a difficult time finding that.
Because you are looking in others for reassurance that it is there, or someone to tell you that it is there. It is not that someone should tell you, it is something that emanates within. Joy.
Ramtha.
Indeed.
Indeed. Are we in danger of some great Holocaust?
What
Whether
means
it be
that which is called Holocaust?
It's such an interesting performance. If I just came across this in the wild, I would think that this was like an actress just doing method acting and entertaining the audience with that. If I
Yeah.
didn't know the context, she's all the way full body into it. She's really taking on this performance.
Very charismatic, right?
Yes.
She even gets jokes in.
Yes. She stays on
or,
top.
or Ramtha does.
Yes.
So you're owned? Like.
Yeah, she at no point is allowing herself to be the butt of the joke. She is always in control of the conversation and always,
Yeah.
if there's a joke that's made sort of at her expense, she laughs along with it. And then she yes ands everything. The message is just so medium and palatable. And
Yes.
just so, I mean, it's like a fortune cookie. Like it,
Yes.
yeah, that sounds like it is so insightful. It's just such a nothing statement, but it's so.
And that's why I was waiting to share the actual message of Jay-Z Knight and Ramtha for that reason, because I felt it better to just show what it is and that it's like very adenine, kind of very fortune cookie, very back of the box.
Very passive, very low effort way to enlightenment or to something, to spirituality.
Yes. So there have been many critiques of this performance, and I could defend all of them. Some people have issue with the voice and cadence, that it reads like something out of The King and I. However, if one subscribes to channeling, then the medium might well influence how that voice is translated. So what we would see is Jay-Z Knight's interpretation of what an ancient entity would sound like. Regardless of the criticisms of her appearance on Merv Griffen, it marked a moment of great success for Jay-Z. She was now on the national stage. It is 1985, and she has the world by the tail.
Wow. She's like the Beyonce of chicanery.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty incredible rise if you think about it. She claims that Ramtha first appeared to her in 1977. Within 3 years, she is, by word of mouth, able to book these performances, these teachings, whatever you want to call what she's doing, these sessions, that she's popular enough that even before being on TV, she's made it into celebrities' homes. She's doing these performances at Richard Chamberlain's house. That's pretty crazy that quickly her message and what she was doing took shape. And at this time, at the vanguard of books, CDs, tapes, so many accounts that I read in researching this involved people talking about, my wife got the tapes and she would just listen to the tapes like day in and day out. We would watch the tapes every night, every day. All she would talk about was Ramtha and this message. So she was always definitely knew where to do sales. So she was very much like an early adopter of internet and all of that stuff. Regardless of crime or not, to go from being a housewife with 2 kids in Tacoma making pyramids in her kitchen in 1977 to less than 10 years later sitting on the couch on the Merv Griffen show and counting people like Richard Chamberlain and Shirley MacLaine as friends, and building a huge ranch and running an Arabian horse business. That's pretty wild. She has something, you know, you watch it and people can laugh, but like, she's got something that people respond to.
It's unique because so many scam artists at that time would go for a pyramid scheme or a straight up just like cult. And this is culty, but she essentially recruited a team of influencers of like the hoi polloi, like glitterati at the time. Like that's early influencer marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. Vanguard.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
So when we left off, it was 1985. A girl who grew up in poverty, the daughter of cotton pickers, left a bad marriage, helped run 2 cable television installation companies before marrying a wealthy dentist and settling in a house in Yelm outside of Olympia, Washington. When she was in her early 30s, while playing with pyramid power, she was visited by an entity named Ramtha and began to channel him. Soon, she was taking her act on the road, peddling her message to celebrities and bored housewives and wealthy men having midlife crises. She was selling books, lectures, CDs, tapes, and making money hand over fist. She left her husband and married a 22-year-old horse trainer named Jeff Knight and started a side business, selling Arabian horses to her adherents before making an appearance on the Merv Griffen show, channeling Ramtha and launching her celebrity into the stratosphere. She was doing well. The message she spread was a simple and positive one. God is within you, love conquers all, the usual. So what could go wrong? Well, you know what they say, more money, more problems. From her appearance on Merv Griffen in 1985, there was criticism of Jay-Z Knight, Ramtha, and the teachings, as they were called. There was concern that Jay-Z Knight was running a cult. And in 1987, 2020 did an expose about Jay-Z. In this time, it turned out that those horses she was selling to her adherents were very bad investments. People started complaining. And eventually, Jay-Z Knight was sent to cease and desist, and the horse business folded. Around that time, Jay-Z and Jeff separated, and she had begun a relationship with a 19-year-old man named Joe.
I mean, I'm not going to call out any similarities.
I resemble that fact, and shut your whore mouth. Oh my gosh. I was just about to be like, oh, am I looking in a mirror? I'll have you know that the latest one is 23.
You are very blonde and charismatic, so you're so close. You're so close.
I've had very large men inside of me too.
Oh, yeah, so have I. So it also became very clear that Jeff Knight was gay. He was having affairs with other men and he contracted HIV. Jay-Z and Jeff were separated, but Jeff was afraid to leave the teachings because Ramtha had convinced him that he didn't need medicine to heal himself, just the teachings.
Wow.
She told him she was $7 million in debt after the horse debacle and wanted him to agree to a $150,000 divorce settlement, about $500,000 in today's money. She refused him access to Ramtha, who he had come to believe in desperately by this time, unless he agreed, so he did. There's a lot of criticism of Jeff Knight, but being in the late 80s, being gay, and having HIV, he must have been terrified. At that time, the virus... Yeah. Sorry. At that time, the virus was the death sentence, and there wasn't much discussion around it publicly. It was steeped in mystery. It's not gullible that he would have clung to any hope there was that he might be healed. However, there were treatments available at this time that could have prolonged or saved his life. Untreated, the HIV advanced to AIDS. After the horse business folded, Jay-Z had another idea to make money. She had the horse ranch converted into a spiritual proving ground that she would call Ramtha's School of Enlightenment. While people didn't live at the compound and pool their finances, as is typical in cults, they could pay for one-day or weekend-long packages to come and commune with other students and hear directly from the Ram himself. She no longer had to travel to spread her message. Thousands of people would come to her, paying upwards of $1,000 for a private session with Ramtha. In today's money, that's about $3,500. To put that in context, the average American lives on about that much or less per month, currently. Yeah, like this is really dark shit. It's dark stuff.
What she did to Jeff Knight speaking as Ramtha and telling him not to seek medical treatment, that's fucking homicide. That's psychotic.
I will say that Jay-Z has denied that this happened, but at the same time, she also claims that she doesn't remember anything when she channels Ramtha. While she's channeling him, she doesn't know what's going on. So by her own logic, she would not be aware of anything that Ramtha had said to him. And Jeff Knight eventually came out and said that Ramtha was a fraud, but also said it was hard for him to tell because there were times when in the middle of the night while Jay-Z was sleeping, Ramtha would be speaking to him and telling him how to make her happy. And even after he felt like it was a fraud, there was a part of him that still couldn't really be sure.
Right. In 1988, she published her memoir, A State of Mind, My Story, which became a New York Times bestseller and cemented her as a bona fide star and spiritual leader. The book mythologized her while also abdicating her of any avarice or responsibility. She didn't want this. She only charged money to quell the demand, and of course, it was Ramtha's teachings, not hers, that people were following. She was nothing more than a channel. Now that there was a school, a gathering of students, a captive audience, the cult accusations started to resurface. This time it was students exiting the teachings, telling of doomsday preparations, breathing exercises used to induce hyperventilation, exercise where blindfolded students are made to run full force into each other, or shoot arrows at targets to find their way through forested areas in search of cards with their intentions written on them, a call to cut off family that does not support their belief. So very common in cults.
Yeah.
And while it's missing the sexual element of marrying or having sex with children, or the leader having sexual access to everyone or overseeing others' personal lives, here are some excerpts from a paper written about Jay-Z Knight and Ramtha from 1995 by Joe Zimhart. Just a warning, this is an old text and some of the racialized language is no longer considered appropriate. It's not clear if this language is the author's or if it's lifted from Jay-Z Knight's own words and texts. So just content warning.
So this is the begin of the quote. Imagine being somewhere 60 miles south of Seattle, preparing to reconstitute and repopulate a now devastated planet. You awaken at dawn and sit cross-legged facing the sun. You connect your wrists, open your hands with right palm up and left palm down, and hold them out before your breast. You close your eyes in meditation and begin breathing deeply. You then blow vigorously with each out-breath as you repeat the exercise for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or however long it takes you to energize your brain and hormones into compatibility with the pure life energy of the void. This is one of the consciousness and energy techniques you learned from Ramtha, a 35,000-year-old spirit channeled by Judy Z. Knight. The Ram has taught you that you are the God within you. During the past months, you have survived an incredible series of catastrophes, including an intergalactic invasion by thousands of reptilian hordes in spaceships led by a dark master named Jehovah. You beheld the planetary shifts that have moved ice caps, shorelines, mountains, and rivers hundreds of miles. With your stored gold, you feel financially secure despite an economic collapse engineered by world bankers and politicians, tyrants aligned with Jehovah's forces that the Ram calls gray men. You sit before your hovel built as an underground copper-lined shelter in 1989. You have been living there for many months, surviving on dry foodstuffs, vitamin capsules, and mineral supplements. You know how to hunt and forage. 200 yards away, among some remaining tall pines, are a few more fellow masters like you, all devotees of the Ramtha Mystery School. All the masters are armed with guns and psychic powers. They are weary of hordes of Asian soldiers marauding in the area, and fierce battles might break out. But these Orientals are no match for the blasts of psychic energy that emanate from your connected palms. 250,000 Chinese have invaded the USA from Mexico, where they have been hiding since 1987. Ramtha had warned you of them in 1990. Quote, when the dragon marches, prepare to hibernate, unquote. Now only a few thousand are left, and they want your supplies, your secrets, and your land. But you have remained steadfast as Ramtha has commanded. For weeks, the night has been ablaze with tremendous flashes of color among the stars as Jehovah's ships fought ruthlessly against those of Yeshua ben Joseph, Yahweh, Ramtha, and the Great White Brotherhood Council of 13. The latter won as predicted by your leader, Ramtha, as he spoke through the body he uses, that of Jay-Z Knight, now a woman in late middle age. You are also a master of forces only dreamed of by mortals throughout human history. The magic powers of fairy tales and legends are now real for you. Soon you will create new trees, grasses, and streams with your powers. You will clean the air, repair the ozone layer, and eradicate the viruses that cause AIDS. You will reconstruct the Edenic paradise on Earth and live in harmony with it as long as you wish. You will choose when you wish to leave the body. Despite all criticism and doubt, you persisted through several years of training under Ramtha's tutelage in the difficult C&E classes given exclusively in Yelm, Washington at Jay-Z's ranch. As a paying member of the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, you penetrated the depths of yourself through pagan dancing to loud music while wearing the mask of your totem animal. The revelations about C&E, how the blowing affects the brain and powers of consciousness, seemed bizarre at first. Later, it made sense as these powers began to appear as psychic intuitions that came true for you. Soon you believed. Levitating yourself as well as stones weighing many tons would be in your power. Ramtha promised it. You wandered blindfolded, stumbling through fields, searching for entry into a maze of canvas walls called the Tank, where you once victoriously found the hidden tunnel, symbolic of the void, at the center after many hours of frustration jammed among 1,000 other blindfolded masters, some crying, some screaming, and some even defecating. You crawled down through the tube and came out somewhere to be led away by helping hands before you could remove your blindfold. You conquered fear when, at Ramtha's command, you dared to run full tilt toward 500 others running toward you, all of you blindfolded, many shouting war cries. Your black eye, cracked jaw, and twisted ankle were well worth the experience. Your powers increased as you took copper and other mineral supplements despite bouts of fever, cramps, and other illnesses. Ramtha taught you as ancient initiates were taught in the great mystery schools of Egypt, India, and Greece. Hundreds had entered the classes with you, but many dropped out from disgust, confusion, or insanity. You managed to transcend all three of these phases and finally broke through the void with Ramtha. You learned secret truths that would shock the religions of the world. You learned that the white light, the ancestors, and the angels that people encounter during near-death experiences are evil frauds and must be avoided, lest you be thrust back into a body to reincarnate at random. Karma, you learned, is fickle and meaningless. Back then you learned so much. Now the entire planet of survivors is depending on you and a few hundred like you to save the earth and lead them into the new age to become sovereign masters like yourself after the big change. So I wanted to include that because rather than try to summarize what was going on at Ramtha's ranch, take what you saw in the Merv Griffen clip, that audio, and that message, and then compare it to this message. So apparently around the same time that she separated from Jeff Knight and that he had contracted HIV, her teachings started to change. And they started to include talk of the gray men, war of the worlds, doomsday prepping, copper, shelters. We all know this. It's the Alex Jones, but 30 years ahead of her time. The message has started to shift from you are God, God is within you, make known the unknown, seek the truth, has now become, it's going to be a war of the worlds, and only those of us that have been enlightened are going to survive, and it'll be upon us to carry on the human race.
The karma is fickle and meaningless, and the entire planet is depending on you and a few hundred like you. It's just very Machiavellian. It's very much like it doesn't really matter what you do. Karma's bullshit, and like you're the hero anyways. Whatever you have to do to save all of these little minions beneath you.
It's also incredibly dated. It's like, hello, Yellow Scare.
Yeah. What on earth was all of that about? Like
that.
Mhm.
That was part of the message of how the world was going to end, is there was going to be this great clash, this war of worlds, interdimensional beings, whatever you want to call it. And that in this dystopian future, apparently China or Asia was going to be at war with the United States, and we're going to attack the United States through Mexico. Apparently this is all supposed to happen in 2040, which seems like a prediction of her own death because she was born in 1946. So she's chosen a time for the world to end, which most likely will happen after she has passed away. So she won't have to deal with that not coming true.
Very,
Right.
very wise.
This is the first rule of sales. When I was working on a screenplay about a salesperson, I talked to Adam Lyons, friend of the pod, friend of us, and he had recommended to me that book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. And it's a classic. But one of the first things is people are more afraid of losing something than they desire to gain something. And so this new message has created a sense of urgency and exclusivity. Only she has it. If you get it, you're going to be part of, a special group of people and the world's going to end. Urgency. So she's hitting like all the marks that you need in sales to get someone hooked in and get someone to buy.
I'll avoid going into why people fall into cults or what motivates them to stay. There are other people who can do that better. I want to stick to Jay-Z Knight as a person. So when I read this, when I hear this, the first thing I think is that Jay-Z Knight is indeed very good at sales. You're offering a unique product. You're appealing to people's need for certainty and to have an answer. Jay-Z hardly invented this playbook. In fact, most of her work is indeed plagiarized from hundreds to thousands of years of spiritual and Gnostic teachings, as well as earlier New Age pioneers. This criticism was heightened when Jeff Knight, his HIV now progressed to AIDS, extracted himself from the cult and initiated a lawsuit against her that became very public and very ugly, with him ultimately stating that Ramtha was a fraud and the entire operation was a business scam. By the time Jeff extracted himself from Jay-Z and Ramtha in 1991, his infection was acute. He sued her in court for a better divorce settlement and tried to argue that she had prevented him from getting treatment through undue influence. He gave an interview to a cult expert that was trying to blow the whistle on Jay-Z, and I've included the link for those who want to watch it. It's very tough knowing that he would be dead a year later before his lawsuit with Jay-Z could be fully resolved. The court initially found in Jay-Z's favor, but he was due to appeal that decision when he passed away, which is unfortunate because if there had been a greater understanding of cult dynamics at the time, he might have had more sympathetic jurors and judges. Even if the School of Enlightenment itself wasn't a cult, there's definitely a cult of personality around Jay-Z. If she was withholding contact with Ramtha and excluding him from events to get him to settle the divorce, this is an act of coercive control, which we're only now starting to really understand and which is just barely reaching our legal system. I think in the UK, there have recently been changes to the law regarding coercive control and allowing it to be charged as an act of domestic violence. But anything with this is incredibly slow moving and infuriating. And, people die before anything actually happens. So
I really suggest people go watch that interview because it really captures someone that you can see is still credulous. He still refers to Ramtha as a different person from Jay-Z. And that was a common thing that I saw with a lot of people that had exited. They still had trouble distinguishing. No, they had trouble talking about Jay-Z as one person. They were still constantly describing her as two different people. She's committed and it's a cult. This was a litigious time for Jay-Z. She also sued another woman who claimed she also channeled Ramtha, and she actually won that and won $800 or a similar amount in psychic damages in an Austrian court. So a woman in Austria claimed to be channeling Ramtha as well, and Jay-Z sued her and said that Ramtha was her intellectual property. If you look at it from a legal point of view, there legally she admitted that Ramtha was not real. Of course, she would just turn around and say that she had to do it that way because of the legal system. She also sued a former student that went on to run workshops using some of her teachings. She is very fierce about her intellectual property, and we love a fierce queen. She won both lawsuits. The result of this bad press was a dimming of Jay-Z Knight's public star, but she retained a large network of devoted students that would move up to Yelm, Washington, to be closer to her in the school. During the 90s, Jay-Z nearly disappeared from the cultural zeitgeist, not only because of her scandals, but because of cultural shifts that saw a decline in the New Age movement around the world. The New Age movement became increasingly commercialized in the 1990s with various products and services marketed under the New Age umbrella. This led to concerns about the movement being exploited for financial gain and its core principles being diluted and distorted. There was also growing scrutiny and criticism from skeptics, scientists, and mainstream religious groups. There were several high-profile exposés of mediums, psychics, and faith healers revealing them to be getting front-loaded with information or even being fed information about audience members through earpieces.
This is something that I've heard about a lot of really high-profile people that my mom used to watch on TV when I was in high school.
Yeah, James Randi really started going hard in the paint. And James Randi was always going after charlatans and frauds. But James Randi really went hard in the paint in the 90s and really got picked up by youth culture that viewed him as, a rebel and kind of a pioneer of this new era that we were entering, which was skepticism and incredulity. And he kind of became a popular figure among young people on the internet because his takedowns were so fun and it fit with the zeitgeist at the time. This is like the time of grunge music, shopping at thrift stores. Everything was about, anti-establishment. And he seemed like someone that was just going after people like Benny Hinn, because this is also when the excesses of the church really started coming up. You had the Jim and Tammy Faye Baker scandal, and then you had like a series of sex scandals, and then you had Benny Hinn and these charismatic evangelical preachers that very much were in the same realm as New Age channelers or psychic mediums or anything else like that. So they were making all of this money and then started to get publicly taken down. And so James Randi kind of emerged as this figure that young people were really into because he was so anti-establishment. He was just knocking down all of these con artists and frauds. And I think that also just had to do with where we were as a culture. Sort of the Gulf War was happening. It seems like, anytime like wars start to happen, the desire to like question authority also starts to happen.
Right. And this was the 90s when MTV was really, really thriving. And that's when I was a kid. That's like my youth. And I see this as sort of like Gen Z rejecting boomer culture today at that time.
Yes.
Importantly, by the 90s, cultural interests began shifting towards other trends and movements like environmentalism, technology, and the rise of the internet. With the arrival of the internet and the proliferation of personal computers, the future seemed to be in the hands of technology, not spirituality. Some concepts and practices associated with the New Age movement, like meditation, holistic healing, and mindfulness, became more widely accepted and integrated into mainstream culture. As a result, the distinct identity of the New Age movement began to blur, and its specific teachings became less exclusive. New Age teachings were repurposed into self-development without the entities or aliens or magic. Think Tony Robbins. There's not a lot of difference between a Ramtha talk or a TED talk these days. It would seem that Jay-Z Knight and Ramtha had gone the way of the dodo, but then again, we're talking about Jay-Z Knight, a woman who reinvented herself several times over and moved like water. I mean, after all, she was certainly reincarnated, wasn't she? Her mom told her so.
I mean, listen, I love her. I am obsessed. I think she's so beautiful, like still. Like, it's so crazy. We are distantly related.
Oh,
so
of course.
I got
Shocking
it honest.
Nobody.
I got it honest.
Well, I mean, what's she supposed to do at this time? Just be like, well, all right, I guess I'll turn it in. She's a performer. It's in her blood.
Yeah.
She has pageantry. She has showmanship. She can't just turn it in. The show must go on.
This is what happens when, you've got yourself a horse girl.
Oh my God.
This is like the final boss level horse girl.
It's so peak horse girl shit, man. You're right.
It really is. I bet she likes to be spanked with a hairbrush. I bet.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh man. There's something about this that I kind of relate to as someone who is I've been in the biz for 14 years, and good golly, have I had to transform myself and start anew and rebrand. And over the years, just kind of keeping up with like, okay, well, that was cool. What's next? But not, manipulating people, coercing people, committing homicide against people I claim to love, all of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.